Okay, here's our sectioning for our round graduated bob. So I'll start off in the side areas. Okay, and now every single section through the side, I'll just be elevating to the exact same point. So the amount of graduation with my guideline will be consistent throughout the entire side area. And the reason that I'm elevating the hair is because I want the line to fall a little bit softer. So hence the elevation. Okay, and this time around I'm cutting my guideline. It's slightly A-line and I'm over directing the hair forward just a bit. Now there are a lot of different ways we can approach this haircut. I could go in and cut square lines that are even to the sides. I could not over direct, but since I want a slight graduated shape through the sides, that's why I'm cutting in an A-line guideline and I'm over directing the hair slightly forward. Okay, so as I'm working my way through the side areas, I'm standing right at the shoulder area and I really have to make sure that my fingers, comb, scissors, sections, they're all parallel. So again, through the side area, we're coming out a graduated shape. So this way my length will start to become, I'll work in a length that goes from shorter to longer. The distance from my guideline to my cutting line is much shorter than my final section, because my final section again will have to travel much further. So again, working with clean, manageable sections, keep your fingers, elbows, sections, scissors, comb all parallel. Then once you finish the side area, go and comb the hair to natural fall. And then from there on the skin, I'll go in and I'll clean my line out. Now when I'm working with details, I just work with the very fringe of my shear. So here I'm jumping into the round graduation portion to the back. Now to work with round graduation, first of all you have to understand the concept. The shape is round, hence round graduation. So you need to assume that the sections through the back will also be round. So through the back I'm working with slightly curved diagonal sections. I connect the length through the side and then from there I cut in my graduated shape. So here I'm beginning on the right side and I'm cutting a shape that goes from longer to shorter. Through the back side I'm not really over directing because I don't want too much graduation. Here I want my graduation to fall a bit lower. So after I cut in my guideline, I'll just go back and I'll just polish that line just a bit. Now my next diagonal curved section, remember to always work in manageable sections. Don't use too gigantic of sections because the bigger the sections, the less details that exist in what you're creating. Now sometimes if you're jammed for time in the salon, you have to cheeky a big section technique out, but just don't make a habit of it. And when you're working with larger sections, just make sure that you're combing the hair and you're controlling it even more so perfect than when you have a little bit more time. Okay, also through the back area, I want my graduation to fall quite low. So as I work this round graduation technique through the back, I have a lot of options as to the amount of graduation that I create. But here I'm just elevating each section just slightly higher than the previous one. If I wanted to create really strong graduation, like a high end result angle, so maybe I can work up to an 80-degree angle, then each section I'll start to elevate the hair stronger. So it all depends on the shape you intend to create, the protrusion of the occipital bone, the width of the head. So all these calculations you have to make in your mind first and then execute the cut. Okay, so same technique, diagonal sections, elevating the hair slightly higher, fingers high, elbows low, elbows working towards the opposite shoulder. And as I work I break this section into several smaller pieces, and as I nail one piece, then I'll shift my body slightly more towards the left because that will give me the greatest amount of control. If you plant your body in the same exact spot, you'll have a higher tendency to over direct the hair too much, which will affect your graduation and your guideline, and then you'll blow your haircut. Okay, so still consistent curve shaped sections. Combing the hair out, elevating slightly more. Make sure your graduation is on, and make sure that you can always see a super clean guideline. Okay, so here I'm starting to build my weight. I don't want to go and see my shape getting too light, so from this point on, kind of like where my section begins at the parietal area where the hair starts to round through the sides, that's where I'll start to hold my weight. So the first sections in the back, I was gradually elevating each section slightly higher. But now, when my curved section begins at the parietal ridge, then I'll build my weight. So I over direct to the same point. On the left side of this haircut, the exact same technique. So again, comb the hair out, over direct the hair slightly forward. Now, and then cut in an A-line guideline. Now you have to make sure that your elevation, length, and angle is consistent with the opposite side. So after you cut this, go and check for balance with your fingers. Check for balance right behind the ears, at the center of the section, and at the very front of the section. Because that A-line, so you'll have different lengths because it's going from shorter to long. So just put a lot of time to making sure you have that shape and balance consistent. Now the next section again is over directed to the exact same point. Now this section is bigger than my fingers, so I'll break it into two pieces, standing in front of the nose, so that allows my fingers, elbows, sections all to fall parallel. Elbows are parallel to what I'm creating. What I cut in my fingers is what I will get technically. A lot of people, they have I won't call it a bad habit. They have a tendency of dropping their elbows, which is fine, but it gives you a much higher possibility of blowing off your haircut. And for example, at this point, if I were to drop my elbows, gravity would want the tips of my fingers to move up to follow my elbow, so then I would just throw off my guideline. Okay, so now that this side area, I'm combing out another super clean section, again standing in front of the nose, comb, fingers, elbows, they're all parallel. Comb the hair to the exact same point that the guideline was elevated at, and that's a good indicator, is that the place where your guideline is most thick, where it's most evident, where it's most prominent. Okay, comb the hair to natural fall, make visual assessments, and then here I'll go in and I'll just polish that line up. So the hair falls differently, wet and dry. So after I cut it technically, I'll go in just with the tips of my Hikari shears and I'll just go and clean up that line a little bit. Now, beginning my round graduated technique through the back, working with curved sections, I'm not over directing forward or back, I'm just combing the hair straight out. And I work the exact same angle that I created through the side area. And this time, as I approach the left side of this haircut, my elbows are high, fingers down, fingers aiming towards the opposite shoulder. And I pivot my body gradually with each piece of that section that I work, moving more towards the right. And next diagonal section. Now here, remember, I'm increasing my elevation slightly. Notice how I comb the hair super clean, and the hair that I just combed is parallel. It's as even as the teeth of my comb as I comb it. That's what I'm checking for as I comb out the hair. And my guideline is super evident, and I pivot my body slightly, working towards the right as I continue this haircut. And again, I don't drop my elbow. If I were to drop my elbow, I personally would probably blow my haircut. And when you're working with these technical shapes, cutting is quite challenging. So if you have these bad habits, it's better to nip them in the bud now, and just don't use bad habits. Use good habits and more intelligent ways of cutting hair. Still increasing my elevation. Watching my stroke count, I have my comb create the shape I intend to cut. Then my fingers follow the comb to the guideline. We're working in manageable sections. So this section is quite large, so I'm breaking it probably 3 or 4 smaller sections. So now I've got my corner. That corner is where the right side of my round graduation to the back and the left side are meeting. So when I see the corner at that point, I know that my haircut's symmetrical, because again, that's where the two major sections connect. A rule of cutting is when you have two major sections connecting, you will get a corner, you will get weight, you will get heaviness. Okay, so again, here my section reaches a parietal area, so I'll be over directing the hair down to where the previous section was cut at. So now I'm starting to build my weight. Okay, still working, elbows up, fingers down. So there's my corner, that's where my section started to meet. And I'll work that corner into the center where it's parallel to the occipital bone. So geometrically, that's the landmark that tells me that my haircut is even. So the next section, again, I'll be over directing to the exact same point, because here I'm building my weight. You could continue elevating higher. Just you have to anticipate that the end result will be fluffier. It'll have more fullness. I want it to have enough graduation, but still on the heavier side to the back. But the angle and the elevation, it's all up to you. This technique, it has to be adapted, because every client's, their personal style, head shape, they're all different. Okay, so here I'll just clean out the hairline area, comb the hair to natural fall, just working with the tips of my fingers, and I'll just clean it out a bit. Now, once the hair is dry, I'll go back and refine this area even more. I just like, I believe cleanliness is godliness, so I just put a little bit of time into it. Now, for the top area, every section will be over-directed to the exact same point. So that elevation of the very last section through the sides and the back. So here I'm building weight. So I'm standing in front of what I'm cutting. Notice how with each portion of that section, my body pivots slightly. So when my chest is parallel to what I'm cutting, then I use my natural tendencies to over-direct the hair to my center of balance. I use that tendency as a tool. It becomes a tool for me. It becomes an asset. And the more assets that we use throughout a haircut, the better the end result will be. Okay, again, building weight, standing exactly in front of what I'm cutting. Now I could also make the sides fall a lot softer. So if I wanted to have softer sides, I increase my elevation a lot with each section. But to me, aesthetically, if the sides are too soft, the line looks really bad. It looks awful. So I prefer working like cleaner, stronger lines, because those are harder to actually execute. If you're really a bad cutter, then you should use really higher angles, because it can hide a lot of your messes. But then as you become more sophisticated with your skill set, your eye will start to develop, and you'll have the ability and the eye for actually creating more excellent shapes. But again, the amount of elevation depends on your client's specific needs. So again, always adapt the technique to your client's details. Standing in front of what I'm working, fingers, elbows, shears, sections, all parallel. And as I work this area, I'll pivot slightly forward. Now I'm just dusting in this length, so just making sure that everything connects. Okay, so now I'll do the exact same technique on the opposite side. So make sure you incorporate lengths from the back all the way into the sides. And you can anticipate a little bit of heaviness where the sides and the back meet, because again, geometry dictates, and hair cutting, it's a basic rule that when we have two major sections that meet, we'll get some weight. So when you find that weight where they connect, then it's a good indicator that your haircut is being executed properly. Okay, still working in the same manner, over directing the hair to the exact same point, because here again, we're building up the weight. Incorporating, working from the back to the front. I could also work from the front to the back. Either way will work. I just find it more logical and more consistent to work my way from the back forward, because at the crown area, a lot of that hair, when it falls naturally, the distribution covers a great amount of mass. So that's why I'll choose to begin to balance everything off, starting at the back. Now for the blow dry, I'll start off by flat wrapping the hair. So I just use, when I flat wrap, kind of think of the head shape as an ironing board. Your paddle brush is an iron, and the hair is a fabric. So I push the hair around in lots of different directions, and once I remove a lot of moisture around the occipital bone, then I'll go and I'll start lifting and leafing hair, like pretty much above the occipital bone. I'd rather not leaf the hair below the occipital bone because they make it way too poofy on me, and it'll kind of like dated. And then again, once the hair is dry, it'll be almost impossible or super challenging to go back and refine that line perfect. So again, to the sides, a flat wrap to remove moisture, and I use a decent amount of tension to get the hair smooth. And you also have to have like a really strong intent with your blow dry. You want that hair, well, not you want, that hair, once it's dry, it must feel like silk. Super polished, super shiny, and one, use tension, two, blow it out in lots of different directions, and three, most important, make sure that cuticle is nailed shut. If you dry the hair off and it's not, well, you're, say, out of a perfect finish, you're like a 90%, that 90%, it's really dangerous because you may lose a lot of clients. So it's just a matter of throwing an additional 1 to 2 minutes and just making your work stand out. Excellence is all in the details. And now that the hair is dry, I go back and I'm just texturizing, I'm removing weight. A good rule of thumb, when I texturize, my aim is to be able to comb the hair super smooth from roots to ends without like no heavy drags or anything like that. I'll just, after I texturize the section and cross check, I like it to comb it to natural fall and then visually assess how it falls down naturally. Because during the technical portion, it's all technical. Now that the hair is dry, this is what the hair will naturally do on its own. So I have to make sure that one, it technically fits. Two, that it aesthetically fits. So technically fitting, there are rules of thumb that you can follow. Visually fitting, it depends on your eye and your, it's weird, but it's a lot about your eye, your creativity, and your eye matching with what you intend to create for your guests. You need to develop your eye more. Go find strong, creative, influential people to work with. Or especially now with technology, you can jump on your phone, you can jump on the computer, you can start Googling all types of different forms of creative arts, not only haircutting. Okay. So now I'll go back and I'm just cleaning out around the hairline, just getting a nice curvature line in through there, because this type of line will actually extend her neck. If I were to cut a square zero line, it would make her neck look wider. I want the neck to extend. So again, this long angle will make her neck look longer. Longer necks are basically more attractive than little stubby necks. Working with details, my eyes are exactly in front of what I'm working. Just polishing, refining until you get it down. Alright, and there we have it, our round graduated haircut. Enjoy.